Tom was a quiet boy who lived in a small house with his mother. They were poor, but his mother always told him, "You are special, Tom. Never stop dreaming." But school was hard for Tom. He was born different. His right leg was shorter than his left, so he walked with a limp. The other kids laughed at him. They called him names and pushed him in the hallways. "Look at him. He walks like a broken robot," shouted Jack, the biggest bully in school. Tom wanted to cry, but he remembered his mother's words. He kept his head down and walked away. Tom kept his pain hidden. Every day, Jack and his friends made fun of him. They tripped him in the hallways, threw his books on the floor, and laughed when he tried to pick them up. Tom wanted to tell his mother, but fear held him back. "What if they find out and punish me more?" he thought. So he stayed silent. One day after school, Jack pushed Tom into a puddle. His uniform got dirty, and his knees scraped the ground. That evening, Tom sat alone in his room, his heart heavy. His mother noticed he was quieter than usual. "Tom, is something wrong?" she asked gently. He forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mama." But mothers always know. Months passed, and Tom finally graduated from primary school. On his last day, he felt relief. He was free from Jack. Then something amazing happened. Tom won a scholarship to a big boarding school in town. It was a dream come true, but deep down he was scared. Would the bullying start again? His parents saw the worry in his eyes. One night, his father sat beside him. "Son, I know school was tough for you, but I want you to remember something." His mother held his hand. "There will always be people who want to bring you down, but you don't have to fight them with your fists. Fight them with wisdom." Tom listened carefully as his parents gave him tips. Avoid places where bullies might find you. Don't walk alone in quiet areas. Always stay with a friend. There is strength in numbers. If anyone bullies you, tell your teachers. You don't have to suffer in silence. Tom nodded. He felt stronger. Maybe this time things would be different. The next morning, he packed his bags and hugged his parents. As he stepped onto the bus to his new school, he whispered to himself, "I will not be afraid. This is my chance to prove who I am." Tom arrived at his new boarding school, a place much bigger than his old one. The tall buildings, the large football field, and the many students walking around made him feel small. He took a deep breath and remembered his parents' words. As he walked to his dormitory, he met a boy named Sam. Sam was friendly and kind. "Hi, I'm Sam. What's your name?" "I'm Tom," he replied with a small smile. Sam noticed Tom's limp but didn't say anything. Instead, he helped him carry his bag. "Don't worry, Tom. You'll like it here," he said. For the first few days, things went well. Tom focused on his studies and stayed close to Sam and some other friendly boys in his class. He followed his parents' advice. He avoided lonely places, always moved with his friends, and stayed away from trouble. But soon trouble found him. One afternoon, as Tom walked to the cafeteria, a tall, strong boy named Brian blocked his way. Brian was the school's biggest bully. He had a group of boys who followed him everywhere, laughing at his cruel jokes. Well, look who we have here," Brian smirked. "A little boy with a funny leg. Do you think you belong here?" Tom felt his stomach tighten. He wanted to walk away, but Brian grabbed his bag. "Where do you think you're going? Say something, little boy." Brian laughed. "Or what? Are you going to fight me?" Tom remembered his parents' advice. He took a deep breath and said calmly, "I don't need to fight you, Brian. You can take my bag if that makes you feel strong. But bullying me won't make you better than me." For a moment, Brian was silent. He wasn't used to his victims speaking with confidence. But then he threw Tom's bag on the ground and walked away, laughing. Tom bent down to pick up his bag. His hands were shaking, but he didn't let it show. Tom smiled a little. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Tom knew that Brian wouldn't stop so easily. Bullies never do. Days passed, and Brian kept trying to make Tom's life miserable. He would trip him in the hallways, hide his books, and whisper mean things whenever he passed by. Tom stayed calm, just like his parents had advised. He ignored Brian, avoided lonely places, and stuck close to his friends. But one evening, something happened that Tom couldn't ignore. It was late, and Tom had stayed behind in the library to finish his homework. When he finally packed his books and walked out, the school compound was quiet. Sam had already gone back to the dorm, so Tom was alone. As he turned a corner, Brian and his gang appeared. Tom's heart pounded. He knew this was bad. He had made sure to stay with friends, but this time he had made a mistake. Brian stepped closer. "You think you're smart, don't you? Walking around like you don't care. Well, I'll teach you a lesson." Before Tom could react, Brian shoved him hard. Tom fell to the ground, his books scattering everywhere. The boys laughed. He wanted to fight back, but he remembered his parents' words. "Don't fight. Use wisdom." So he took a deep breath and looked up at Brian. Instead of anger, his eyes were filled with something else. Calmness. "If you want to hit me, go ahead," Tom said firmly. "But that won't change anything. I will still be here tomorrow. I will still study. And one day I will be successful. What about you, Brian? Will bullying make you successful?" Brian hesitated. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Tom slowly stood up, dusted his uniform, and picked up his books. He turned and walked away, leaving Brian speechless. That night Tom lay in his bed thinking. He knew Brian wasn't done with him yet. But something told him, maybe, just maybe, he had planted a seed in Brian's heart. The battle wasn't over. But Tom was ready. The next few days were strange. Brian didn't bother Tom as much as before. He still smirked when he saw him, but he didn't push him or throw his books around. It was as if something had changed. Tom noticed that Brian's gang was also different. They weren't as loud as before. Some of them even looked uncomfortable when Brian tried to bully someone else. One afternoon, as Tom sat under a tree reading, Sam ran up to him. "Tom, you won't believe what I just heard." Tom looked up. "What is it?" "Brian's gang is breaking apart," Sam said excitedly. "Some of his friends don't want to follow him anymore. They said they're tired of bullying people." Tom raised his eyebrows. This was unexpected. "Really?" "Yes. And guess what? I heard that Brian got into trouble with a teacher. He was caught cheating in a test." Tom wasn't happy about Brian's trouble, but he knew one thing. Bullies always act tough, but deep inside they have their own struggles. Maybe Brian was fighting his own battles, just like Tom was. That evening, something even more surprising happened. Tom was walking to the dormitory when he heard someone call his name. He turned and saw Brian standing alone. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then, to Tom's surprise, Brian sighed and said, "Why don't you ever get angry? Why don't you fight back?" Tom thought for a moment. Then he said, "Because fighting won't change anything. Have bigger dreams, Brian. I don't have time to waste on hate." Brian scoffed. "Bigger dreams, huh? You think you'll be successful one day?" Tom smiled. "I don't think I know." Brian didn't say anything. He just stared at Tom, then walked away. Tom watched him go, feeling something change in the air. He wasn't sure what it was, but one thing was clear. Brian was thinking. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Days passed, and Tom noticed something strange. Brian was keeping his distance. He no longer pushed Tom in the hallways, no longer threw insults at him. It was as if he was deep in thought about something. One afternoon, during lunch, Sam nudged Tom. "Look at Brian," he whispered. Tom turned and saw Brian sitting alone at a table, staring at his food. His usual gang was nowhere to be seen. The other students didn't seem to notice, but Tom did. "He looks different," Tom said. Tom wasn't sure, but something in his heart told him Brian was struggling with something. Later that evening, Tom was heading back to the dormitory when he heard a noise behind the school building. Curious, he walked closer and saw Brian sitting on the ground, his head in his hands. Tom hesitated. This was the same boy who had made his life miserable. But now he looked broken. Taking a deep breath, Tom stepped forward. Brian! Brian quickly wiped his face and stood up, trying to act tough. What do you want? He muttered. Tom could see the sadness in his eyes. Are you okay? Brian scoffed. Why do you care? Tom thought for a moment, then said, Because I know what it feels like to be alone. Brian's tough expression cracked for a second, but then he shook his head. You don't know anything about me. Sighed. Maybe not. But I know that people who hurt others are usually hurting inside. For a moment Brian was silent. Then, in a voice so low that Tom almost didn't hear, he said, I failed my test. My dad is going to be so mad. He always tells me I have to be the best. But I'm not. Tom was surprised. He had never imagined that Brian had his own struggles. You don't have to be the best, Brian, Tom said softly. You just have to try your best. Brian looked away. Easy for you to say. You're smart. People respect you now. Tom smiled a little. Respect isn't given, Brian. It's earned. You don't have to be a bully to be strong. Brian didn't reply, but something in his face changed. For the first time, he didn't look at Tom as an enemy. He just looked lost. Tom took a step back. If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Brian standing there, deep in thought. As Tom entered his dorm, he felt something in his heart. This was just the beginning. Maybe, just maybe, Brian's story wasn't over yet. The next day, Tom expected Brian to go back to his old ways. Maybe he would pretend their conversation never happened. Maybe he would start bullying again. But something had changed. Brian didn't push anyone. He didn't laugh at the weaker students. He didn't even walk around with his old gang. Instead, he kept to himself. His eyes filled with something Tom had never seen before. At lunch, Tom and Sam sat together as usual. Sam leaned closer. Did you see Brian today? He looks different. Tom nodded. I think he's realizing that bullying doesn't make him strong. Tom scoffed. Well, let's see if it lasts. But Tom had a feeling that Brian was fighting a battle within himself. That evening, just as Tom was about to leave the library, he heard someone call his name. Tom! He turned around and saw Brian standing awkwardly by the door. Tom blinked in surprise. Brian scratched his head. Listen, about yesterday. He hesitated. I don't know why I told you all that. I'm not used to talking about stuff. Tom closed his book and smiled. It's okay. Everyone needs someone to talk to sometimes. Brian let out a long sigh. I don't know how to be different. Being a bully. It was the only way I knew how to get respect. Tom looked at him seriously. Respect isn't about fear, Brian. It's about how you treat people. Brian stared at the floor for a moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, Do you think I can change? Tom didn't hesitate. Yes. Brian looked up surprised. But it won't be easy, Tom continued. People will still see you as the bully you used to be. You have to prove to them that you're different. Brian took a deep breath. How? Tom smiled. One step at a time. For the first time ever, Brian gave a small, unsure smile. Then he nodded and walked away. As Tom watched him go, he felt something deep inside, hope. Maybe Brian's journey wasn't just about him changing. Maybe it was about proving that even the worst people could find their way back. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, Tom noticed something unusual. Brian was sitting alone again. His old gang had completely abandoned him. They whispered about him, laughing behind his back. Some of the students he had bullied before now ignored him, as if he didn't exist. Sam nudged Tom. Looks like Brian got a taste of his own medicine. Tom frowned. That's not a good thing, Sam. Tom scoffed. After all he did to you, why do you still care? Tom sighed. Because I know how it feels to be alone. Later that day, something surprising happened. In the middle of the school courtyard, a younger student accidentally dropped his books. Papers scattered everywhere. The old Brian would have laughed, maybe even kicked the books. But instead he bent down and started picking them up. Everyone stared. "What's he doing?" someone whispered. "Is he playing a trick on the boy?" another student asked. But Brian just handed the boy his books and walked away without saying a word. Tom smiled. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. That evening, as Tom was heading back to the dormitory, he found Brian waiting for him outside. "I did what you said," Brian muttered. "It felt weird." Tom chuckled. "Change always feels weird at first." Brian sighed. "People still don't trust me." Tom nodded. "That's because respect isn't earned in one day, Brian. Takes time. Keep doing the right thing and one day they'll see you're serious." Brian was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Tom and said, "Thanks." Tom smiled. "For what?" Brian hesitated, then smirked a little. "For not giving up on me." Tom watched him walk away, feeling something warm in his heart. Maybe, just maybe, Brian was on his way to becoming a better person. But the journey wasn't over yet. Years passed, and Tom stayed focused on his goal. He worked harder than ever, spending long hours in the library, asking teachers questions, and never letting anything distract him. He knew what he wanted, to succeed no matter what. Brian, on the other hand, was changing too. He stopped bullying completely. At first, students didn't believe it. Some still avoided him, waiting for him to go back to his old ways. But Brian stayed patient. He started helping younger students with their work, joined the football team, and even apologized to some of the people he had hurt. One day, during an assembly, the principal called Tom to the stage. "This young man came to our school on a scholarship," the principal said. "Despite all the challenges he faced, he never gave up. Today, I am proud to announce that Tom is officially the best student in the entire school." The hall erupted in applause. Tom couldn't believe it. As he stepped forward, he saw faces that once laughed at him now looking at him with admiration. Then the principal continued. "And that's not all. Because of his excellent performance, Tom has been awarded a full scholarship to study medicine abroad." Gasps filled the hall. Tom's heart raced. A scholarship abroad. To study medicine. It was a dream come true. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at the crowd. He saw his teacher smiling with pride, his friends cheering loudly, and even Brian nodding at him with respect. After the assembly, Brian walked up to Tom. "Looks like you really made it," he said with a small smile. Tom grinned. "We both did." Brian chuckled. "I guess we did." Then after a pause he added, "I'm proud of you, Tom." Tom's heart swelled with gratitude. The boy who was once bullied, who once walked with his head down, had now become the best student in the school. As he packed his bags for his journey abroad, he remembered his mother's words. "You are special, Tom. Never stop dreaming."